Welcome to this explainer. Okay, to kick things off today, I want you to step into a very specific environment with me. Picture yourself walking along a dim, quiet path in the Hoh rainforest in the Pacific Northwest. There are these thick hillocks of moss just undulating all around you, damp earth beneath your feet, and you're occasionally passing warning signs telling you to watch out for aggressive elk. You look up and you see these massive big-leaf maples, and they are completely sheathed in licorice ferns, lungwort, and spike moss. The author we're diving into today describes it perfectly. She says, the trees look exactly like they're wearing green Grinch suits. It is literally a world within a world, absolutely teeming with secrets.
So you might be wondering what exactly brought our author into this incredibly lush green world. Well, it was a pretty profound emotional pivot. As a climate journalist, she'd spent years reporting on what she calls the death plot. You know the kind of news, endless reports about disease, environmental disaster, and climate decline. It's heavy, it's exhausting, and it can just make you numb. To counter that burnout, she actively went looking for the exact opposite of death, and she found it in the continuous, creative growth of plant life. It's this relentless quest for a livable future that's characterized by constant new becomings.
That desperate search for some good news led her straight down a massive rabbit hole of botany journals. And that brings us to the source material we're looking at today, The Light Eaters by Zoë Schlanger. She started digging into embargoed scientific papers on her lunch breaks, and what she discovered was this incredibly vibrant, rapidly moving field of study. Scientists are currently uncovering fundamental, mind-blowing truths about the dynamic, entirely unseen world of plants.
Okay, let's jump into Section 1, Redefining the Plant, Beyond the Green Background.
To really redefine what we're talking about here, I want you to take a second and picture a common plant. Maybe it's a bright sunflower with a thick stalk, or, that potted golden pothos hanging in your kitchen window. We naturally tend to view these things as a known entity. They're just passive, decorative background objects framing the real theatrics of animal life, right? But what if that assumption is just completely wrong? Consider a massive shift that's actually happened recently in science. For the longest time, we really only located intelligence in animals closely related to humans on the evolutionary tree, like primates or dogs. But then science entirely revolutionized its view of the octopus. We suddenly realized they use tools, they remember faces, and they have this incredible network of distributed neurons. And this is despite the fact that our last common ancestor with them was a seafloor-trailing flatworm over 500 million years ago. We learned that profound cunning can evolve completely independently, on a totally separate branch of the tree of life.
Which brings us to a really fundamental question. If intelligence can evolve completely independently in a creature as weird and alien to us as an octopus, what exactly is a plant? Because, as Schellinger discovered, the neat little container where we keep the concept of plants in our minds, it's about to burst wide open.
Moving right along to Section 2, The Salty World of Ferns, Ancient and Cunning.
Let's start with Schlanger's very first botanical obsession, the fern. Ferns are ancient. They appeared on the evolutionary scene long before the very concept of seeds even existed. And just take a look at this staggering number, 720. We humans have a mere 23 pairs of chromosomes. But some of these ancient ferns, they have up to 720 pairs. It's a level of biological complexity that perfectly explains why it took the genomic revolution so incredibly long to finally map a complete fern genome. It's like a giant puzzle with way too many pieces.
Now, the very first fern genome they actually managed to sequence was the Azolla fern, and its resume is just wild. First off, it's the world's smallest fern. But roughly 50 million years ago, vast blankets of this tiny plant absorbed so much CO2 that it literally cooled the planet. Even more amazing, it actually evolved a specialized little pocket specifically to house cyanobacteria. This bacteria turns inaccessible atmospheric nitrogen into usable food. It's so effective that farmers in China and Vietnam have been using this tiny living fertilizer factory in their rice paddies for centuries. In fact, Schlanger was so totally enamored by this little titan that she actually went and got it tattooed on her arm.
Now, ferns have a long history of blowing human minds. Because they reproduce without seeds, medieval Europeans were just completely baffled by them. Since they couldn't see any seeds, their logic dictated, well, the seeds must simply be invisible. And following the lore of the time, they genuinely believed that if you could find these invisible seeds, they would grant you the magical power of invisibility.
But, as is so often the case, reality is way weirder than magic. Ferns actually reproduce using spores, and it gets crazier.
Before they become those leafy green fronds we all recognize, they exist as this tiny, one-cell-thick plant just sitting on the forest floor. The males release these swimming, corkscrew-shaped sperm into puddles of rainwater, and these tiny cells, they're basically endurance athletes. They will swim for up to 60 straight minutes, searching for female eggs to fertilize.
So the takeaway here is that fern reproduction is a highly active, dynamic process. But in 2018, scientists found out something even crazier. Ferns can actually sense when they are near competing fern species, and they will emit a hormone to actively slow down their rival's sperm. Obviously, slower sperm means less competition for sunlight, water, and soil for their own offspring. As Schlanger aptly puts it, intentionally interfering with another plant's sperm is incredibly salty plant activity. Absolutely cutthroat.
That brings us to Section 3, the pseudoscience setback, a field frozen in time.
Okay, so if plants are out here doing things this complex and, frankly, devious, you're probably asking yourself, why are we only just learning about this now? Well, to understand that, we have to look back at a massive controversy that basically froze the entire field of plant behavior in time for decades. Back in 1973, a book called The Secret Life of Plants became an absolute global phenomenon. But the problem was, it mixed real science with wild, completely unscientific projection. It claimed plants preferred listening to Beethoven and could somehow read human emotions. A former CIA agent even hooked a polygraph machine up to a houseplant, claiming the machine proved the plant registered stress when he simply imagined setting it on fire. Naturally, when rigorous scientists tried and failed to replicate these wild claims, the backlash was incredibly severe. It was so bad that major institutions like the National Science Foundation froze funding for plant behavior research entirely.
Mainstream botanists were just absolutely furious. In 1979, physiologists published this scathing debunking in a major journal, famously calling the book's contents a corpus of fallacious or unprovable claims. And because the original authors tried to argue that you needed spiritual development and empathy to reproduce their experiments, traditional peer review boards firmly slammed their doors shut. For a long time, anything with even a whiff of plant behavior was immediately dismissed as pseudoscience.
Which brings us to Section 4. The Botanical Renaissance. The science catches up.
Despite the freeze-out, a select few scientists quietly held on. They bided their time until the tide finally started to turn. Over the last decade and a half, armed with incredible new tech, we're talking highly advanced microscopes and rapid genetic sequencing, science finally has the hard empirical tools to rigorously prove what once sounded totally unbelievable. Modern technology has finally stripped away all that new age stigma, and it's allowing this fresh, exciting stream of peer-reviewed papers to emerge. And what they are finding is literally reshaping biology as we know it. We're seeing promising indicators of memory in plants. We're finding that they can actually distinguish themselves from other organisms. Even more stunning, they can recognize their own genetic siblings. If you place a plant next to its kin, it will actively rearrange its leaves within a matter of days just to make sure it isn't shading out its own family members. I mean, how incredible is that?
And let's talk about their sensory abilities, because this completely challenges what we assume it means to observe the world. Recent studies suggest that pea shoot roots can actually hear water flowing through entirely sealed pipes. And not only do they hear it, they will actively change their direction to grow toward that sound. They are perceiving an environment they literally can't even touch yet. And when it comes to defense, plants are playing 4D chess. When lima beans and tobacco plants are being chewed on by insects, they don't just sit there and take it. They react by emitting chemical signals into the air that actively summon the specific predators of the exact insect that's eating them. Basically, they are calling in targeted biological airstrikes to protect themselves.
And if you still somehow think of plants as these passive, peaceful little background decorations, check this out. Researchers found a certain type of tomato plant that, when it gets attacked, secretes a chemical that forces hungry caterpillars to stop eating its leaves, turn on one another, and literally eat each other instead. It is a ruthless, brilliant survival mechanism. It's basically a botanical horror movie.
All right, let's wrap this up with Section 5. Plant Futures, a New Paradigm of Mind.
As you can imagine, discoveries like these are causing an absolute uproar in academic journals, and they're ushering in a completely new paradigm. Honestly, no botanist looking at this new data is anything less than agape with wonder. It's sparking this fierce, fascinating debate about the very word intelligence. Some scientists make a really good point. We only determine intelligence in humans and animals by inference, right? By watching how they behave and solve problems.
This new camp of researchers argues that if a plant performs an incredibly complex action that we would instantly call intelligence in a dog or a monkey, it is completely illogical and heavily zoocentric to deny plants that same label just because they don't have a brain.
Which leads us to our final slide, and a massive, truly provocative question to leave you with today. Are plants conscious? They don't have brains as we traditionally understand them, sure, but they clearly have memory, kinship, cunning, and complex communication. So, might a brain simply be just one evolutionary way to build a mind? The next time you look at a fern in the woods, or a tomato plant in your garden, or even just that little pothos sitting in your window, ask yourself, what exactly might it be sensing right now, in a world we're really only just beginning to understand?